Hi guys, welcome to the Fitness Paradox. I'm Richard Wolf, and tonight we're talking about the dangers of applying outdated advice to your strength training lifestyle. But before we do that, I want to start with a story. It was 1989, and I was working at Central DuPage Hospital at that time as a health educator. And I can remember vividly always believing that things are going to get better for consumers. There's going to come a day when it'll be easy for consumers to understand what to do and how to do it when it comes to living a healthy lifestyle. Now that was 1989. Fast forward 30 years later to today, and I hate to say that we are no better off than we were 30 years ago. In fact, I believe that we're much worse off today when it comes to knowing what to do and how to do it from a healthy lifestyle standpoint. We have a 24/7, never-ending cycle of new fitness advice that's online, on the radio, on the television, in books, magazines, newspapers, the guy down the street. The challenge that we face as consumers is to identify what should we embrace, what advice should we embrace, and what should we not worry about, because all fitness advice is not created equal. And so tonight we're going to walk through 5 commonly held contentions or beliefs that have really been displaced with better new evidence, and show you how that applies to your life as well. So without any more time, let's dive right in on number 1. The first contention that we see in most consumers today is that they believe, or have believed for years, that if they're exercising, they have to make a choice between exercising their heart with what we would call steady state aerobic activities, things like biking, walking, jogging, swimming, all sorts of activities like that, or training their muscles by strength training and improving their muscular strength. And so this has been an issue for quite a few decades, and we've seen people in our business say, I need to go exercise my heart now, so I'm not going to strength train. And this has actually been a barrier for a lot of folks for living that strength train lifestyle. So here's what you need to know when it comes to choosing between your heart and your muscles. It was 2008 that the United States Department of Health and Human Services issued the first ever physical activity guidelines for Americans. These guidelines were really a call to action for adults, because it was the first time that a federal health agency said all adults should be strength training on a weekly basis. We had never heard that before for adults, or consumers had never heard that before. So that was 2008. The Department of Health and Human Services said you should go out and be active for 75 to 150 minutes a week of some form of physical activity. Again, what we would loosely refer to as cardio or aerobic, but we call that physical activity, 75 to 150 minutes a week, and all adults should strength train. This was very different in 2008. We'd never heard that before from a health agency. Fast forward to 2018, 10 years later, and the second edition of those guidelines was published and updated and expanded. And they went on to include teenagers and adults up to the age of 99 should be strength training on a weekly basis. So again, more evidence, more concrete recommendations saying we shouldn't be choosing between, do I train my heart or do I train my muscles? I should really train both of these systems. And the footnote to this point is that if you want to train your heart, you have to exercise your muscles. There's no way to stimulate your cardiovascular system to get healthier without using your muscular system. So the doorway to a healthy heart, the doorway to a healthy cardiovascular system is the muscular system. And so those of you who are MedFitness clients, you know that last year I wrote an article entitled Killing Heart Disease, and in that article I mentioned several ways that strength training actually reduces risk for cardiovascular disease and can reduce your risk for a fatal heart attack at the same time. So what is the take-home message on this? Should we continue to think about, I'm either going to be heart healthy or I'll be strong and have good muscular fitness? The two are completely linked, and the largest health agency in the United States is saying, don't separate these. All adults should engage in strength training on a weekly basis, no matter what your age is, and you should also go out and be physically active for the benefits it has to provide. So what is our action step here? What is our take-home message for you leaving this presentation tonight? We're going to recommend a very simple action step, which is to simply get stronger. Why am I saying this? Not because I own a strength training studio. Of course, you could say, well, Richard, you know, he's a little biased. He operates MedFitness. We do, but we're saying that you should get stronger because when you look at the evidence, people who are not strength training as they're aging, of course, are losing muscle, and that rate of muscle loss accelerates as you get older. And with muscle loss comes muscle weakness. And so the weaker you get, the more difficult it is to be active. The more unlikely you are to go be active with both formal and informal activity, the weaker you get. So what we're arguing here is begin by being and staying strong as you age. Yes, there's direct health benefits to that. There's direct heart health benefits to that. But then as you age, the people who are more likely to get out and take the walk, take the bike ride, whatever it might be, those are the people that have good muscular fitness. So especially in an aging society, we're saying that your first action step is to stay strong as you age. Don't allow yourself to get weak because the probability of both heart disease and low activity the probability of low activity goes up, the probability of heart disease also goes up at the same time. So, step one, stay strong as you're aging. Number two, if you talk to 100 people and you ask them, what's the best approach for losing weight? What we will consistently hear is people saying, well, slow and steady wins the race. A slow, gradual, consistent rate of weight loss is the best way to approach losing weight in a modern world, especially here in the United States. And I'm going to argue that that's completely wrong. If we look at the science, we'll see it's the opposite of that, and I'll explain that to you in 2 seconds here. So if you're losing weight slowly, let's say you're taking the conventional advice, you're losing maybe half a pound a week. We hear that one referenced frequently. Half a pound a week is a safe, good rate of weight loss. If you're losing half a pound a week, and we compare you to someone who's losing 2.5 pounds per week. Let's just do the straight math on this. In 21 days, working to lose half a pound a week, you will have lost 1.5 pounds. If you're losing 2.5 pounds, you've lost 7.5 pounds in 21 days. So at the end of 21 days, we have two outcomes. One, someone's lost 1.5 pounds in 21 days. Think about that for just 2 seconds. 3 weeks of work, 1.5 pounds down on the scale. Or 3 weeks of work, 7.5 pounds down on the scale. Now, two things are happening here. Number one, the person who's lost more weight is practicing at a higher level those weight loss behaviors. So they're becoming more skilled, more proficient, more capable at those weight loss behaviors because they're simply practicing at a higher level. So they're becoming more skilled, even short term. And number two, look at the difference. 1.5, 7.5. At the end of that 21-day period, the 7.5 pound weight loss person is clearly more reinforced. They clearly have a higher level of commitment and resolve because they've gotten more benefits. They've gotten greater benefits. And this is true for any behavior change you can talk about. When people get more benefits and they're more reinforced, they're simply more likely to continue on that same trajectory versus when they get tiny benefits that are hardly measurable, they eventually just give up because it's not reinforcing enough for them. So this is just human nature in action. So let's look at a study that has actually looked at this issue. This is a 2014 study published in the journal Obesity. They looked at just over 2,000 adult men and women who were diabetics and compared the weight loss in the first month to what happened 12 months later. So they looked at how much weight did people lose in the first 4 weeks and compared that to where they were 1 year later. Now, the folks that lost the least amount of weight had lost 3 pounds in a month. Now, think about that. You're losing about 0.7 pounds a week. Think about your own life if you want to lose weight. You're losing 0.7 pounds per week, so you're down about 3 pounds in 1 month. Or you've lost about 2.3 pounds per week, and you're down 9 pounds in that first month. So think about that. You could either lose just about 2 pounds, or you could lose 3 pounds, I'm sorry, 9 pounds, I'm confusing you. You could either lose 2 pounds in a month, or you could lose 9 pounds in a month. So what they then did is they followed those groups 1 year out, 11 months later, and said at the 1 year mark, how did these people do? Did the slow and steady do well, or did the losing weight more quickly do better? In this case, again, this was 2014, just over 2,000 adult diabetics. Those who lost weight slowly, a year later had lost 8 pounds. All right, in 1 year you've lost 8 pounds, 12 months of hard work, 8-pound weight loss. Those who lost weight more quickly, a year later, they had lost 30 pounds. Think about that for 2 seconds. Think about your own life. In 1 year, you could lose 8 pounds with hard work and a lot of sweat equity, or you could lose 30. So my point here is that this study in the Journal of Obesity 2014, another study from the Journal of Obesity found very similar results, and other reviews and meta-analyses have found very similar results, where when you get this greater weight loss up front, it translates into more of those behaviors and better long-term success overall. So what is our take-home message here? Again, this goes against sort of conventional wisdom here in the United States. We're going to recommend that you get what we describe as a quick start if you're trying to lose weight. And by quick start, I'm simply saying practice high levels of the weight loss behaviors over the first 4 weeks, because number one, you'll be more skilled at those behaviors, you'll be more proficient and more capable at engaging in those behaviors by practicing high levels of them. And because of that, you will have lost more weight, which is obviously more reinforcing, and we have growing evidence showing us when that happens, people do more successful 12 months out and beyond. And so this goes against conventional wisdom, but take-home message number 2 is if you want to improve your body composition, you're trying to decrease body fat, get a quick start. Work at a high level of compliance over those first 4 weeks to build momentum, skills, and be reinforced when it comes to losing body fat. So that's take-home message number 2. Counterintuitive, but we see it here at MedFitness, and the evidence is showing us that to be the case as well. Number 3, another common notion here in the United States is that if you're going to get fit, if you're going to get healthy and really embrace the strength training lifestyle, it takes enormous sacrifices, and you just have to put a mountain of sweat equity into this process to see any meaningful progress. And again, I would suggest that the science tells us the opposite of that. So let's give you an example here. Here's a study that was published in the Archives of Internal Medicine, and it is referred to as the Mr. Fit study. That stands for Multiple Risk Factor Intervention Trial. What this study did is it took just over 600 adult men and women between the ages of 35 and 57 and attempted to measure their risk of dying from a heart attack over a 12-year period based on the number of risk factors they had. So a risk factor is anything that increases the probability of something happening. So in this case, they took men who had elevated cholesterol and or high blood pressure and or who were smokers. And so you might think that if you have high cholesterol and then you develop high blood pressure, that's one risk factor plus another, your risk of a heart attack doubles. You might say if I add that third one and I become a smoker and I have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, my risk triples. But in this case, the numbers were much worse than that. When they looked at the addition of a second risk factor, the risk of a fatal heart attack went up by 5-fold. So these men in this group were 5 times more likely to suffer a fatal heart attack when they added that second risk factor. Add the third risk factor, and they are 13 times more likely to suffer a fatal heart attack over this 12-year follow-up period. So what are we really saying here? What we're arguing is that it's not any given single risk factor, it's the synergy between multiple risk factors. So if you do the math in reverse, this is the most important message of the night probably. If you do this math in reverse and you say, I'm going to make one change in my lifestyle, I'm going to make a tweak to my diet to help bring my blood pressure down. If you make that one change, you've just gone from a risk of 13 times higher dying from a fatal heart attack down to 5. So you've cut your risk of death by over 50%, making one change in your lifestyle. This is mind-blowing to the average consumer because they just don't understand this. So the Mr. Fit study would argue that it's the first change that is most consequential to your lifestyle. Now I'm preaching to the choir because pretty much everyone watching this video is already living that strength training lifestyle. So you've already taken that initial step, and yes, strength training reduces multiple risk factors for multiple diseases. So you've gained that big initial gain by simply investing 1% of your week, which is those 2 strength workouts a week, to be living the strength training lifestyle. So in summary, our take-home message is any change will do. When you're looking at your lifestyle and you're debating, gosh, what should I do? Should I make an improvement in my diet? Should I add the physical activity? Should I keep strength training? Should I add strength training to my lifestyle? Any change will do simply because it is the first change that is the most powerful because it reduces that negative synergy between other risk factors. So this is overwhelmingly good news for everyone here tonight. And if you are already living the strength training lifestyle, you now have an enormous reason to continue to embrace that health habit because it clearly lowers your risk for about a dozen chronic diseases that are super normal here in the United States. So any change will do. The first change is the most consequential to your health. Moving forward, we hear this a lot, right? People say, well, I've got bad genes because my grandmother had diabetes or my great aunt had breast cancer or whatever the disease might be. And so very often people feel like, well, there's not a whole lot I can do because it's in the genes, and I just have to sort of deal with that issue and not be too hopeful that I can avoid chronic illness. Again, another misguided notion when it comes to your health. It was actually back in the late 80s when the Surgeon General published the Surgeon General's report on nutrition and health. And what they did is they asked the question, why does our health change over our life cycle? Why is it that I'm healthy and my neighbor's in and out of the hospital frequently over a 30-year period? What is it that accounts for the variation in health? And what the Surgeon General did is it basically put together a blue ribbon panel of health experts to publish this 700-page report. And they came up with the 5 determinants of why our health changes. And some of these are obvious, some are not so obvious. Number 1 is a lack of medical treatment. If you don't get to the doctor when you need to, especially under urgent circumstances, that can obviously be life-threatening. So a lack of medical treatment accounted for about 10% of health variance. 20% was our environment. We know that the environment does affect our well-being. The next 20% was our genes. Again, we're going to circle back to this, but they said, okay, about 1/5 of health variance is due to your DNA here. This is something we're born with, so we think we just have to deal with it. And then lastly, 50% of your health over your lifespan is due to your lifestyle. Of course, you hear me use that term a lot. That's your day-to-day health habits, including whether or not you strength train on a weekly basis. And so this was 1989 is when this was published. Since then, we have a mountain of evidence only reinforcing what that 700-page report concluded and actually expanding these numbers, suggesting that up to 70% of lifestyle of our health is due to our lifestyle, our day-to-day habits. Now, hold that thought for just a moment. We could end the talk right now. You could go home, start your day tomorrow, knowing that the overwhelming majority of your well-being from this day on is due to your day-to-day health habits. That puts your health in your own hands. There's no arguing here that genetics plays a very small role relative to your day-to-day habits. But maybe you do have bad genes. Maybe there is a gene defect in your family. How should we be thinking about this? Well, again, more good news. What we now have is the field of epigenetics. And this is the study of genetic expression. And so let's understand this. Epigenetics means that if I have a gene that increases my risk for heart disease, maybe the last 5 generations of my family have had fatal heart attacks, and I have that gene. What can I do here? We used to think that there's nothing you can do. Just live as good a healthy lifestyle as you can, but that bad gene, it's going to catch up to you eventually. But we now know that's not the case. We now know that your health habits can affect how the gene behaves, and this is called genetic expression. It's called up and down regulation. You can essentially turn good for you protective genes on to protect you and reduce your risk of disease, or you can turn bad for you genes off. You can down regulate these and modify the expression of the gene. In other words, you may have the gene for cancer, heart disease, whatever it is. You could go your whole life without having that gene expressed and turning on so that all sorts of bad things happen to you from a health standpoint. So this is incredibly exciting. It means that if I choose to eat the apple, if I choose to do that strength workout, and I do these things with my lifestyle, not only are there immediate benefits because I'm doing these things, we've known that for 50 plus years, but now we're learning that the bad genes I do have, if I have them, are actually modified. And the good ones are turned on, the bad ones are turned off. This is unbelievably good news. So when we argue the totality of lifestyle on your health in this context with epigenetics, what we're saying is that it's 70 to 90% of your health from this day on is due to everything you choose to do and not to do from a lifestyle standpoint. So what is our epigenetic? What is our take-home message on this one? What is our action step on this guy? It's pretty obvious. We all need to embrace a healthy lifestyle for the obvious immediate benefits, but even more so those of you who feel like our family has bad genes. Even more so for you because you are the ones that have the chance to down-regulate and up-regulate those genes so that they're not expressed, so that those diseases don't show up in your lifetime. So embracing the healthy lifestyle is critically important. It's at the centerpiece of your well-being. And now even those who have genetic predisposition have incredibly good news because of our understanding of how gene expression is modified by our own health habits. So this is incredibly good news. So that's action step number 4 is embrace a healthy lifestyle. And yes, you hear me talk all the time about the strength training lifestyle of including strength training in your routine. And again, many of you, I realize I'm preaching to the choir, but this gives you an incredibly powerful reason to continue to strength train and to continue to pay attention to the rest of your health habits as well. And then lastly, number 5 here is this whole issue of willpower. Boy, I can't tell you how many people have told me that they feel like they need to have superhuman willpower to, again, be fit, be healthy, avoid illness, etc., reach their fitness goals. Let's break this one down for a second. Scientists would call this restraint. And so your ability to say no to unhealthy foods, to maintain exercise routine, and so on and so on. Let me give you a couple of viewpoints here that will help expand your understanding of this. Number 1 is that if we look at humans throughout history, let's actually go back 80,000 years from today into the Paleolithic era and see what our ancestors were doing back then. They were 110% opportunistic in their lifestyle. And by that, what I mean is that they always ate what was most readily available. This makes common sense. You don't have to be an archaeologist or paleontologist to understand this. If we go back and there were wild animals around, of course, our ancestors would kill wild animals, they'd eat them, they'd eat plants when they were available, they would eat fish depending upon what part of the globe they were existing on. And so our ancestors were extremely opportunistic. They didn't sort of discern and say, well, we can't eat these plants here because these aren't good for us. If I haven't eaten for 3 months, I'm going to be eating plants. And then, of course, if I can kill a large wild animal, I'm going to eat that animal because, again, that's a lot of calories and that's a lot of nutrients as well. So they were incredibly opportunistic. And we see the same thing today with modern societies in the year 2019. Human beings eat what's around. I'm going to use myself as a good example here. We have a saying that we use in our program here. If you buy it, it's not a matter of will you eat it, it's a matter of when will you eat that food? I'm 56, and I remember when I turned 50, people who know me know that I like beer, so I got a bunch of beer gifts. And so I had these 12 packs of beer, and suddenly I've got 4 or 5 of these things in my fridge. And normally, I never have beer at home. The fridge is fairly empty, actually is empty from a beer standpoint, even despite the fact that I like beer. So suddenly I found myself having a beer. Oh, that was delicious. Let me have another beer and just round it off with 2 tonight. And so going from having no beer in my home to having a bunch of beer in my home, I start drinking 1 or 2 beers a day, 7 days a week. I'm adding about 150 to 300 calories a day to my diet. That translates into 50,000 to 100,000 extra calories per year. And so this is an incredibly easy way to start to creep up on the scale from a body fat standpoint because I have this beer in my environment. Why did I not drink it before? Because it just wasn't there. Why am I drinking it now? Because I like it and it's in my immediate environment. So anyone who knows me again knows that when my favorite foods are around, there's only one thing that's going to happen. I will eat those favorite foods. I'm also a sweets lover, so if there are cookies, cakes, pastries around, I'm eating more than I should of those particular foods. And so here's my point. People look at me and they say, well, you know, you're in the fitness industry, you've been doing this your whole life, so this is just kind of normal for you to be quote unquote disciplined and have an enormous amount of willpower. I'll be the first to tell you I have no restraint when it comes to those foods. Now, if you put a food in front of me that I don't like, of course, that's a whole different issue here. But if you have something in front of me that I do like, I will eat that food. And so what I've done for decades is I've managed my environment. And so our take-home message here, when you think about improving your eating and managing your other health habits, it's about really changing your environment so that your response to your environment changes. You don't have to rethink yourself. You simply have to change the environment so your response to the environment changes. So here's a quick example. One of my routines is I'll shop on Tuesday night and I'll shop on Friday afternoon for produce. So I'll get a lot of vegetables and fruits on those 2 shopping trips. And I'll buy canned, frozen, fresh, anything that helps me to get those foods into my body. I also strength train on Tuesday afternoon and I strength train on Friday morning. These are just examples of routines in my life. It's in my calendar. I know when I'm going, and then I pack my food bag each night so I have a lot of that food with me as I come to work and as I'm in my car traveling around doing things. And so this is a normal routine for me. So I'll be the first to tell you I have no restraint when it comes to the foods I like, but what I do have is healthy routines. I have a routine around strength training. I have a routine around going to the supermarket. I have a routine around packing my food bag. And by doing that, I give myself a fighting chance to live a healthy lifestyle in an environment that is incredibly unsupportive of the strength training lifestyle. Dr. David Katz, in his book Disease Proof, would call this skill power. He would say that by developing healthy routines and over practicing healthy routines, you develop proficiency at these tasks. And so that's skill, obviously. If you just look up what is skill, it's proficiency at a set of tasks. So he calls this skill power. It's an accurate descriptor of what's actually happening here. So I have skill power because I have healthy routines that are doable, repeatable, and can be applied long term. I'm not trying to flex my muscles and bring home cookies and not eat cookies. I'm not trying to flex my muscles and have my fridge packed with my favorite beer and just not drink beer. I'm not doing those things. I'm not going down those paths. Do I have some beer on the weekend? Sure. Do I have some treats on the weekend? Sure. But these are not pillars in my lifestyle or diet, and they're not part of my successful routine. The routine is around shopping, packing, preparing, when I work out, and so on and so on. So the take-home message here is that, again, it goes back to what we just said, but you do have control over your health habits and your lifestyle. It's about establishing these successful routines so that you can better manage your environment. When you change your environment, your response changes. You don't have to reinvent yourself. You just have to make these easy win changes to your environment, and you then have a fighting chance to actually eat substantially better, as well as maintain that strength training lifestyle by having that routine in place as well. So, what have we really said here? We've said these guys are connected. Don't split them. All health agencies on the planet tell us this, and we have strong evidence showing that when we train our muscles, our heart is healthier. So don't split these out. Get stronger so you can be active and get all the benefits that strength training has to offer. Slow and steady is as good as it sounds on paper, really doesn't let you practice these behaviors at high levels. It's not as reinforcing, and we have a growing body of peer-reviewed literature saying that people do better when they lose a little more weight. Again, on a healthy diet, but they do better when they lose a little more weight up front to build momentum and to develop skills and be reinforced. First change, right? You don't have to live like a superhero here. It's about making that first change, and if you've already added strength training to your lifestyle, you're way ahead of the curve because you're building momentum with that one. So get it off your plate that you have to make big sacrifices. Genes, even if you have the bad genes, we can up and down regulate those. This is incredibly good news. We're living at a time when we have unbelievable control over our future health and our destiny from a well-being standpoint. So even if you have those genes, the lifestyle is still the impact player for you and me. And then lastly, establish healthy routines, modify your environment so that you can live the lifestyle that supports your health versus relying on that restraint, which again, since the beginning of time, our ancestors never demonstrated that they could resist the environment. They always ate what was around. We do the same. We just have to change our food environments as much as we're able to so these routines become a doable, normal part of our lifestyle. On that note, I am going to thank you for watching tonight. I appreciate you being here. This presentation is also being recorded and will be available at our Learning Center. Our Learning Center is medfitness.co/blog. So it's medfitness.co/blog. You can get all our videos, all our articles, all our tools and resources for yourself and or anyone that you know that wants to learn more about the strength training lifestyle. And I look forward to seeing you next month.